Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast, episode number 65. The legend, Larry Weishuhn, and Trailing the Hunter's Moon. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
I'm Trent Cole.
And I'm Richie Elam from Blitz TV.
And you're listening to Big Buck Registry, Big Buck Podcast.
Hey folks, this is Dean Vanier with Northwoods Common Sense, and you're listening to my favorite and most informative hunting podcast show on the internet, Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Hey, this is Doug Castrava from the Horny Buck Seed Company, and you're listening to my favorite podcast on iTunes, the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Hey, what's going on? This is Jay Scott, your host of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast. Thanks for tuning in again to the show. I'm sure you're listening in your car, or you've got some earbuds in, and you're probably going to listen to this guy over here too. Dusty, what's happening?
Man, I'm almost speechless.
Speechless? What?
Almost.
Since when? I mean, that's like a miracle.
I'm almost speechless, man.
Why?
Because of our guest.
I've been thinking about this for a very, very long time.
But, you know, I'm amped up. Hunting season is close. Every time we get on here, we're another few days closer to whitetail bow hunting season. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, the bow season is pretty much in full bloom across the country, I think, as far as I can tell. Maybe a couple spots that haven't opened up, but hey, man, it's showtime.
Yeah, it's definitely, the air is right. You know, they're talking 65-degree mornings coming up here soon here in Ohio. And wow, I am really, really, really getting excited.
How about 49 degrees? How does that make you feel?
Wow, that's hunting weather for sure. That's like in the stand weather.
We had that this past week.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
It was in the morning. Of course, it warmed up to like 75, but still, when you feel 49-degree weather at night and you're covering up, you're like, it's time, baby. Let's go.
It's time for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, if you ain't amped up for hunting season, something wrong with you.
Dusty, would you like to explain to our people that are joining us right now who we've got on the show tonight?
We have a legend.
A legend.
Legend.
Truly a legend.
Truly a legend. You know, somebody that's really, really done some amazing things for the whitetail habitat management, food supplement for the whitetail, and all kinds of other critters that run the woods. Man, the excitement of having this special guest on with us, you know, we're going to learn something. We're going to talk about some things that he's mastered. You know, that this guy can take a set of antlers and bring a buck right in his lap. And that in my eyes is very impressive.
Yeah, he's been doing it for over 30 years.
And I grew up by watching this fine gentleman on TV teaching me how to hunt whitetails.
And he is a gentleman. I mean, he's a gentleman of the finest caliber.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. He's right. Yeah, he's a great guy. Larry Weishuhn, he is joining us right here on the Big Buck Podcast.
You know, Larry is a very polite,
yes,
very informative,
yes,
and he knows what he's talking about when it comes to hunting.
So knowledgeable, and man, I can just listen to him talk all day.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I'm tired of hearing you talk, so let's get on with the show with Larry.
I'm with you. Larry Weishuhn, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast. How are you, sir?
Jay, I'm absolutely great. It was such a pleasure to, you know, we kind of knew each other a little bit through Facebook and some other places and through reputations. And finally get to meet you at the Kittery Trading Post this past weekend. It really was a great thrill as far as I'm concerned. I had a chance to listen to the bog bound. I can't even talk this evening. It seemed like you got me excited, by golly.
Nice. All right.
We like to hear that.
I like that.
But I had a chance to listen just a little bit, and so I know what you guys are about, and it's absolute pleasure and honor to be here with you, by golly.
That's awesome. We're
awesome.
Always glad to have you're a legend to us, Larry, so we're glad to have you on the show and get
Oh, my goodness.
I know. Talk some hunting, and I had a great time meeting you at the Kittery Trading Post, too. I know that the Pigman was there, Brian Quacca, and he was doing some shows, too, and then I think there was a country and western singer upstairs that kind of booed us. We all had to go outside because he was taking up all the floor space. It is what it is, right?
It is. Tom Miranda was there too. Of course, Tom was probably, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most famous of the bow hunters there is in this world, and I feel very fortunate to call him an old friend. Tom and I have been friends probably 30 plus years. I've dealt with him numerous times on different TV shows, going back to Whitetail Country and some of the others that we did. And in the years when I was with Thompson Center Arms, he
Right.
produced our game trails and some of our other shows. And I've had a chance to hunt with Tom as well several times. So it's really great to see him up there. It's been a while, I think, since he's been up in the Northeast. But just to spend time with him as well was kind of like old home week. And of course, that's kind of the way I feel about going up in that part of the country. Is I've been coming up there now for a bunch of years and get to see friends that you just kind of see every once in a while and kind of find out what they've been doing as far as bear hunting is in that part of the world, and as far as deer hunting and moose hunting. So it's an absolute pleasure being up there with you guys.
That's cool. We like it when you guys come around. Dusty and I are hoping to get out and venture out to see your parts of the world too, because it's just so interesting to get out in the U.S. and see different parts and see how people live and thrive and all that kind of stuff.
It is a little different down here.
That's cool. That's it. That makes it interesting for me anyway.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Larry, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I grew up about 90 miles west of Houston and kind of right along the edge of the Gulf Coast area of Texas, just kind of in the gravel hills in a little German-speaking community called Zimmerzeit. Matter of fact, I couldn't hardly speak English until I started school, and because all of our families and neighbors spoke German. But
No kidding.
grew up out in the country, and my dad loved to hunt coonhounds and ran coonhounds at night and chase beagles with chasing rabbits rather with beagles in the afternoon when we had time. And so I kind of grew up in a hunting and fishing community. Started fishing with my granddad back even long before I can remember. I mean, he'd come by and pick me up, and we'd go dig worms, and we'd head to the local creek to see and catch what we could. So grew up in that kind of situation. And gosh, people ask me, says, when did you start hunting? And honestly, I can't remember. My dad and granddad started carrying me around on their back, squirrel hunting primarily. We had a few deer and hunted deer, but didn't see any, But at the same time, started hunting with them so far back that I really can't remember when I actually started hunting. I remember my first squirrel, my first rabbit, my first deer, all that other kind of thing, which came a little bit later on. But been doing it for a long, long time. And been very fortunate, as a career. I came along at that time when there was interest in whitetail deer, but not to the point as it became. John Woodard started writing about material whitetail bucks and Peterson's hunting, field and stream, outdoor life, and those others. And I was very fortunate to have known John, who was a very, very dear friend during my early years as a wildlifologist. And after I graduated from Texas A&M, or really before I did, I was doing wildlife disease research to the Department of Veterinary Pathology, and so when all this interest really first kind of got started in whitetail deer, we were developing a lot of the early management programs. We were doing a lot of the nutritional research and all those things through Texas A&M University, but then also with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. So I was kind of at the right place at the right time and didn't mind stepping out and stepping forward, trying to learn as much as what we could.
That's awesome. So when did you decide to do your first television show? What year was that?
Actually it goes, I just graduated from Texas A&M University, and there was a little radio station locally. It was TAMU, and it was the Texas A&M University station, and a guy by the name of Larry Godfrey had a little outdoor show on that network, and I did a bunch of stuff with Larry on hunts for whitetail and some fishing and things like that, and that goes back to about 1971.
Gotcha.
So started a long, long time ago, and then really kind of got into the TV thing when all the interest in whitetail deer was just in its infancy. John Wooders and Jerry Smith and I did a video called Whitetails Judging Trophies, which was the first time anybody had ever run any kind of videotape in terms of how to age deer, how to field judge deer, and those kind of things. And as a result of that, Bill Jordan had just started Realtree, and Bill and some of the guys back in, David Blanton, and had just gone to work for him, and they were looking at trying to do outdoor television shows. And so because they knew what I had done as far as whitetail deer is concerned, and I knew Texas was a destination that they wanted to get into. They contacted me, and a friend of mine, Bill Whitfield, and I set up a lot of the hunts those guys first did. And so I was really involved in those early shows that Bill Jordan and the guys did with Realtree, and which led to a lot of different other things. So, I mean, it goes back quite a few years when you get right down to it.
I was going to say, I recall watching you on TV when I was just a young guy, and I think I was intrigued by your white beard even back then. Like,
well, it was just turning. It used to be a brilliant red, and it
used to be red.
Turning
right. It's like,
that.
It's like, this guy is the coolest guy I've ever met. He's sitting here rattling big deer, and I wasn't even paying attention. I didn't know where you were, but I said, this is a cool show, and it would mesmerize me, and I'd wait for it every week to come back out, and it was one of the first shows that ever caught my attention, and lo and behold, probably 20 years later, 25 years later, here we are talking on the radio, and actually met you. I was like, this is awesome.
It is for me too. I'll tell you what. Again, timing is everything. I don't care whether you're hunting. If you're at the right place at the right time, and you can pull the trigger or release the arrow, things happen right. And that's just the way I was. I mean, I just happened to come along at that right time when the infancy, or it was in the infancy as far as whitetail deer interest is concerned, as we know it today. And
Gotcha.
Guys like John Wooders and we're starting to write about mature deer. Jerry Smith was a photographer, and for the first time, somebody beside Lenny LaRue had a cover on the whitetail deer on the cover of the different magazines, and it just so happens the photographs that Jerry was shooting down on the King Ranch showed some unbelievable deer. And so, you hear a lot of people like take credit for being the beginners of the whitetail revolution, kind of as we have seen it happen the last several years. But when you get right down to it, it was Jerry Smith photographing big whitetail deer and John Wooders writing about it. And then after that, guys like David Morris and North American Whitetail and Buckmasters and all those others kind of followed after that.
Right.
But those two guys, really, when you get right down to it, were the ones who really started. And then you had Murphy Ray and Al Brothers back in 1976. I'm starting to write a book called Whitetails Producing Quality Whitetails. And between all that, it really kind of is what started all the interest, like we see in whitetail deer these days.
That's very fascinating. You always kind of wonder where it all starts, and to the point where it is today, because it wasn't like that before that. I don't think there was a whole different mentality about whitetails. But
there was. I mean, there really was. Like I said, Lenny LaRue was a photographer, and almost anytime you saw a whitetail deer photograph, either he or Irwin Bauer were the two that did photography on whitetail deer. And most of the time, they had just nice little bucks, and I'm talking about year and a half, 2.5-year-old deer. But when Jerry started photographing these older mature bucks, people all of a sudden started paying attention and going, oh my gosh, whitetail get these pretty darn nice deer. And really kind of, we've come a long way. We really have. We still have a long way to go in a lot of ways, but when it comes to whitetail deer management and whitetail deer hunting, we've come a tremendously long way.
Right. Gotcha. So when did you decide to take this filming that you did and turn it into a career?
I used to be on staff with a lot of the different national magazines like Deer and Deer Hunting and Shooting Times and Whitetail Journal, was a whitetail columnist for North American Hunter for a long time, and a bunch of those things. And of course, what we saw is I could see down the way that even though at that time magazines were king, and we were just starting to see some of the first deer hunting shows, the first hunting shows, kind of as we know these days. There were a few, like you go back to American Sportsman many, many years ago, but we saw those starting to begin, and I could see that over a period of time, a lot of the money that had previously been going to magazines in terms of advertising dollars was going to be siphoned off toward TV shows. So from an economic perspective, that was one of the reasons I kind of didn't abandon writing at all, but I kind of started shifting a little bit more toward TV, and it was more of an economic kind of thing and a matter of opportunity, I think, than anything else. Those first TV shows that we did many years ago, I mean, we did a little bit about Realtree Outdoors, and when TNN first started doing those, I mean, it was absolutely amazing the number of people watching and the response that we got when we did a show.
Right. Yep. That's what I remember was the TNN shows.
Right. Exactly. I mean, at one time that basically was the only network that was really showing any outdoor hunting shows
Right.
of any kind. And, there might be the occasional local show or something like that on one of the local networks, but when TNN decided they wanted to do outdoor shows, I mean, it really brought it to the forefront.
Right. Fascinating. All right. So you've been around for a while. This is an industry you've been in for a long time. How do you feel like when you come across a new hunter that's just getting into the field? Does that still excite you today?
Absolutely. I am absolutely thrilled when anybody gets into the hunting. We put a lot of emphasis on bringing kids into hunting, and that's extremely important. But to me, I don't care whether if that individual is 2 years old or whether he's 102 or she's 102 years old. To me, bringing new hunters into the field, and I've had the opportunity to spend time with all different age classes, and both men and women and boys and girls, and introducing them into hunting. And when you get them into hunting, and it doesn't really take a whole lot of a shove, you just kind of have to create an opportunity for them to do so. You can just watch your eyes light up, and all of a sudden the entire world changes for them, and it absolutely changes to the good for them. So
right.
Yes, I really still get excited, seeing people getting into the outdoors, and with the talks and things we do at a lot of different places. You run across people that are just now getting into hunting, or they're even thinking about getting into hunting. Hunting is so important when it comes down to the perpetuation of wildlife and habitat. And if I can't imagine anybody that loves wildlife not being a hunter or a fisherman, because
right.
if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have what we have these days. I mean, most all the animals already be gone. So, hunting is important for a lot of different reasons. I think we all, as a human species, are pretty much hunters when you get right down to it. Those of us who love the outdoors and pursue the outdoors and pursue animals, we're hunters. And then we've got a few people out there that don't like us hunting and shooting and all that. And, they're hunters too, whether they like it or not. But, they're hunting for ways to prevent us from doing it, I guess. So
right.
whether they like it or not, we're still kind of classified as hunters.
Right.
I agree to that.
I have to share a little story that occurred at Kittery Trading Post. I came up the stairs to find you later in the day, Larry, after the event was starting to wind down, so we could do just a quick video. And we were sitting there chit-chatting, and this I call him like a classic New England redneck, basically, came up to the stand. And let me describe the stand. You had a chair, kind of a tall chair, and a tall table, and there was a commemorative, I think it was a 22, if I'm not mistaken.
It was the 50th anniversary of Ruger 1022's rifle there.
Yep. And it was on the bench, or on the table, and it was displayed nicely. And you had some of your flyers out and some pictures for signatures and things like that. And the guy comes up and he says, "Hey, is this a raffle or something?" And I just started like snickering because he didn't quite understand what it was about, and he was trying to understand. And you said,
right.
You said, "No, it's not. It's a commemorative rifle." And he said, "Well, what do you have to do to get it?" I said, "You have to write a check to get it." That's basically what she said. And that was
bottom line, yeah.
Bottom line. That was a perfect response. And then he says, "What are you, some kind of famous hunter or something?" And I was just, I was laughing on the inside so bad because, like, where has this guy been? Has he been living in a cave for the last 30 years? How is it possible that this guy has never seen Larry? So, but you handled it with so much delicacy because at the end, the guy came out and said, "Well, I'm just starting to get into hunting." And then you practically gave the guy a hug because you knew then that this guy was going to engage in something that you've loved for so long. And that was perfect.
Well, it is, and like I said, hunting is important. It will be important in his life, but it's also extremely important in so many other people's lives, and probably more important than anything else is that perpetuation and management of the habitat that creates the livelihood and place for not just the game species that we hunt, but for the non-game species that we love to see and hear as well. So. How can you not want to give the guy a hug and say, "Welcome to the fold"?
Absolutely. Welcome to the family.
I'm so glad you're here.
Exactly.
What can we do to help you?
And that's what that event was. I mean, it was a celebration of all things hunting, but just to have some.
It is, yes, sir.
And he was not a young man. He was probably mid-30s or so.
I would think so, yes, sir.
So to see a 30-year-old man getting into the sport of hunting it's just tremendous. So that was awesome.
It is.
Yeah. I think Dusty wanted to pick your brain a little bit, Larry, about some some game management techniques.
Yeah,
that probably won't take very long, but I'll try.
Right.
All right.
I just want to pull out a few pointers for somebody that's trying to manage. Let's give an example of a 200-acre farm. Larry,
Yes.
what can they do to better their place to have a better herd? Keep the mature bucks in. You got any pointers that they can do to the land just to keep their herd healthy and obviously keep the mature bucks in the area?
I'll tell you, keep a mature buck in the area. Mature bucks are like people. There's some of them that are roamers. There are some that are very sedentary. There's some that will pick up and leave and come back, and some stay a long time. Some come back. The home ranges of mature bucks can be quite huge, and sometimes upwards to, 10,000 acres or more when you get right down to it, and all different types of habitat. So sometimes trying to maintain that buck in one particular spot for any great length of time can be a little difficult. But at the same time, if you get in there and try to improve that habitat as much as you can, so there's adequate cover, adequate food, escape cover, the rut's going on, if there are does in the area, to try to keep him there. So to me, one of the things that you can do in a lot of places, it just kind of depends. There's lots of it depends answers to any question that you ask about wildlife management, and it really kind of depends upon what current habitat is and the practices around it as far as hunting is concerned and what everybody else has done. But one of the things that I think you can do regardless is to go within the interior, try to go into the middle part of that property and to try to make it as attractive to whitetail deer or any other game species or non-game species as possible by increasing the food. Now, that may mean doing some cutting to where if you got a heavy canopy to where more sunlight can penetrate down to the ground, to where you get all kinds of little undergrowth and things like that growing, and then even once that stuff starts growing up, going in and managing it so that you cut it in half. And other things you can do at the same time is if you have a mass-bearing tree, that whether it's an oak or a chestnut or anything that produces any kind of fruit or nut, is during the wintertime, when things are really kind of bad and even if there's snow on the ground, is look at this tree and look at the drip line, which is at the outermost reaches of the branches that are out there. And what you can do is you can go to the local feed store, seed dealer, hardware store, whatever, and the way you suggest people to do is buy some the cheapest fertilizer that they can find, and then go right along that drip line and dig a little trench, whether you have to, even if you can, if the ground isn't frozen, and dig a little trench and just kind of pour a little bit of, just do a trickling of fertilizer all the way around the entirety of that drip line. And so that's going to do several things. And one, is going to help feed that tree. And if it produces any kind of a mass, it'll generally make it sweeter, whatever it is, whether it's acorns, whether it's fruit. And at the same time, just beyond the edge of that drip line, you're gonna have influence on those other species, plants that are there, that are going to, again, make them not only more nutritious, but also more palatable. The interesting thing about whitetail deer is that they have an innate ability to find the most nutritious part of any plant or the most nutritious food in a given area. It's something that's ingrained into them, and they're interesting because they're ruminants. They have 4 chambers to the stomach, just like a cow does. But a cow, when she reaches out and eats, she just wraps her tongue around everything and pulls everything in. That whitetail deer's got a pointed muzzle, so it can reach in and grab the most nutritious part of the plant that's there. So anything that you can do to improve the nutrition, which in turn improves the palatability, is going to draw and hold those animals considerably longer or better than something that if you go in there and really kind of do nothing. So we've created our own little natural food plots, if you will, in some instances, and in certain areas where we've gone in and fertilized specific plants or just did a little food plot area, maybe not even really planting anything, but just putting out fertilizer and knocking the overstored vegetation down to where the sunlight can penetrate down to the ground. So it's little things like that you can do. In terms of hunting, you can provide that animal a little bit of a sanctuary. We've had places where we've had 200 acres or larger or smaller, and just designated a 3 or 4 acre area in the center of that place as nobody goes into it. It's just it's an area those animals can feel free. You don't hunt them, you don't disturb them, and a lot of times creating those little sanctuaries too makes a lot of difference in terms of being able to hold those deer in a place that's 200 acres or less.
Right. That's awesome, Larry. That was a perfect answer. And, there's a lot of listeners that tune in that, these tips right here could take your hunt to the next level. And like I said, that was a very awesome answer. And it's something that we learned from, your drip line, that's your exterior limbs of your trees.
Right.
Take a little bit of fertilizer. Like you said, take the cheap, go in there and just, give it that little extra boost that'll make your trees that much different from the neighboring farms or the land around you. Possibly keep a mature buck or keep your does right there in your area. And great answer to the question, Larry. That'll help out a lot. When we get
we played around with that a lot of different places, not just, and we played around with it up in the Northeast and Midwest and the Southwest. So it's a pretty universal thing that works almost anywhere you go.
Yeah, that's something that any average hunter can take to the woods and take advantage of that. That's simple and very thriving to work with great results for sure. When you get into food supplement, we come into a lot of winters get bad. Say we're in the Midwest, and up towards New Hampshire where Jay's at, we run into harsh winters, deep snow. Obviously in Texas, it's not quite as bad. You guys have been droughty and not had the tonnage as far as the greens on the ground. When we get in the Midwest, and I know you can cover every state on whitetails, what's something we can do to hold over as a supplement wintertime to keep the herd, the nutrition up, and we're not seeing death from cold, malnutrition? What's something that you can kind of cover a little bit on about keeping the deer in nutrition through the winter months?
I'll tell you what, it's a tough deal in some instances because it depends really on kind of what the state regulations are. Well, you guys have a very stressful period of time during the winter time. A lot of time we have a very stressful period of time here in late summer, and so and even late winter sometimes before we have green up. So we run into stress periods as well. Down here in Texas, we have the opportunity to do a lot of supplementations as far as full rations are concerned. The downside of that is, if not done properly, you pull animals into a specific area and you can have parasite problems. And if you do have a disease problem, it can spread that disease much quicker. So there are things there that can be positive but can also be negative. One of the things that we try to do more places than anything is, knowing that we're going to have various stress periods, is that we try to keep that population in tune of what that habitat can support at the worst of times. That's one of the reasons a lot of places that I've dealt with in kind of the southern part of the country, we've carried a deer density of let's say a deer to 35, 40 acres, simply so there's food available when times get really, really hard. So that's one thing that can be done. The downside of that is we as hunters have a tendency to want to be able to see a lot of deer when we go out, rather than spend weeks and weeks and weeks, and hoping we get to see one. So there's some other things that can be done in that part of the world. Again, with the fertilizing, there are things like, in some areas you do have a little bit farther south, honeysuckle, which is an evergreen. A lot of the briars and berry vines that you have, the raspberry vines, blackberry vines, again, those respond very, very well to fertilization. So to come back to that same sort of thing, I think what can be done in a lot of those areas is to go in there before the winter, during the growing season, maybe in the summer or even in the early spring, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the fertilizer to actually break down, is fertilize those areas to where you get a tremendous amount of growth creates a really good root stock, and so they can take a little bit more browsing pressure than it might otherwise. So I think that's one of the things that you can do. We've played around with some of that in areas there in kind of central part of Maine where there have been some clear cutting and things. It's amazing what grows up, and what we did there is went in and created a situation where we did fertilize, and so we're able to keep animals in. The other thing that we did in some of those areas is, in the wintertime, if you had some of the cedars that you have up there that are evergreens, you can go in and cut down limbs or half cut some of those to where there is food available. But to me, it still comes down to one of the very best things that you can do is to try to maintain that population at what that habitat can support when times get bad. And that's sometimes something we really don't want to do as hunters because it just kind of knocks that population way down.
Right, but the survival rate goes up if you manage your deer herd. Your survival rate's going to increase because of the nutrition that's available for the herd.
Absolutely, and sometimes, as we have done down here, is what happens is the deer populations rebound much quicker than the habitat does. So, to me, if you go in and we've had some areas that I've dealt with scattered across the country where through permits issued by the state game departments that we shot a tremendous number of deer off in a year knowing that it was going to be a really harsh winter when it started. And those animals that remain are in better health conditions as a result. They'll have a tendency to not only produce, twins at least, the does will, and occasionally some triplets, but they will have that opportunity for those fawns that are born to survive at least to be a year and a half or older deer in the future.
Right, absolutely. And you brought up a great point there, and I'm going to kind of pinpoint out some things that somebody in the Midwest or even more to the east a little bit, that the honeysuckle, it's often mowed down and sprayed and killed off. And hearing you talk about it, that's a huge mistake to get rid of that honeysuckle.
It is.
First to green and the last to lose its leaves. It's a huge supplement for the food source going into the winter for the whitetail, and it's often like you burn off or cut down or it's so much tonnage there that can carry the deer on and have a healthy herd from the honeysuckle, and it's often overlooked. It
is. We used to run a bunch of country for deer hunting there in the Midwest, in Illinois and Kentucky particularly, and had a lot of honeysuckle, and we depended very, very heavily on that honeysuckle as a winter food supply. And again, it's one of those plants that responds very well to any kind of supplementation. And to keep it from getting totally eating down, if we were doing any kind of clearing at all, we would we'd lay out a kind of a windrow across some of the honeysuckle so that you created it worked great for rabbits as well because they kind of use that as a sanctuary too, and as did turkeys and when they were nesting and some of the other birds too. But it also protected that honeysuckle from being totally eaten down in the ground. And the honeysuckle and a lot of the briars, the smilex or greenbrier, all those are really, really good winter food supplies. And if fertilized, there may not be a whole lot of leaves on it during the wintertime, but those deer will eat a fair amount of those tender twigs that are on the end of it. And again, it's going to carry those animals through the wintertime. Right. I'm going to ask you a question that I've heard quite often, and I want you to answer it because it's something you're going to recognize right away what the issue is. People come to me, a hunter, they say, Dusty, hey, I walk into the woods and all my trees, the leaves are burnt. They're gone. It seems like just the lower limbs, all the leaves are gone. Larry, can you answer the question what their issue is? Too many deer.
That's exactly right. Too
many deer. Anytime you see a browse line, and when you start seeing that, you're trying to carry too many deer in that area for what that habitat can support in the worst of times. That's regardless of where I am, whether I'm hunting or just driving through the countryside and looking, and I'm always, of course, interested in deer and other species that are out there as well. And I'm always looking to see if I can see any signs of browsing. If you start seeing any appreciable signs of browsing, it tells me that you're carrying too many deer for what that habitat can support. And the two things that you can do there is either reduce that deer herd to what it can carry and so it can make it through the worst of times, or to determine ways that you can increase the food supply on a daily basis, not a seasonal basis, but a daily basis to maintain that population at the present level.
Right, and that's where it comes into deer management from a hunter. That helps the world go around when we reduce the herds down. If it wasn't for the hunters, and obviously the traffic takes care of quite a few deer around here in Ohio. But, we manage the deer, things stay healthy. The trees will be literally burnt up if it wasn't for the hunters and management and us taking that in control. And, disease would be traveling around quite a bit. That's where a hunter plays a huge role. And it's, something that we got to pay a lot of attention to. That's for sure.
It is. You hear people talk about, the way things ought to be, than the way they were many, many years ago. What they don't realize many, many years ago, and you go back, a lot of Ohio was a heavy canopied forest with a few birds living up on the top, and not a whole lot living underneath. And if you go back to and look at what the Indians did many, many years ago, they would go in and essentially burn areas. I mean, and just like in the Central Plains, a lot of the Indians there would burn huge expanses of prairie country, which encouraged green grass to bring back the buffalo. So, I mean, by doing that, we've become managers. And with the world as it is, with our population that it is, and our demand for human food and human habitation in areas like that, it becomes ever more important for us as hunters to properly manage the habitat that remains and the animals that are there. And one of the ways of doing that is to manage the wildlife populations that exist upon that habitat as it is, so that you can perpetuate it into the future, not only from the habitat perspective, but also from the game and non-game species as well.
Awesome. Right on. That's very correct. And, it's something that we need to pay more attention to in management.
Yes, sir.
For sure. Let's get away from deer management. I want to get into something here that every year, this is no kidding. I'm going to be honest with you. Every year I get on the net and I look you up. I get close to the rut and I think that my rattling skills need to be freshened up. So come on, Larry, let's talk about some rattling.
Rattling. All right. That sounds cool. My first recollection, the first show I ever saw, Larry, was you rattling a big buck in Texas. So
it gives me cold chills to think about.
I know. Same here.
I love it.
Me too. Just remembered it.
Oh, man.
All right, Dusty, go ahead with some questions on rattling.
Yeah, I mean, let's say we're getting close to the rut, where the bucks are starting to, they're starting to get excited. They're moving around more than they should in the daylight hours, and they're starting to check scrape lines and rub lines. And what is most hunters doing wrong when they're rattling? We're going to start out with the wrong things to do while you're rattling. Then we're going to work into the,
I think one of the things that goes wrong when it comes to rattling, and there's no right way at times to rattle, and sometimes there's no wrong way to rattle because deer just respond. One of the things that happens most of the time that I hear is I'll talk to people about rattling, and they says, well, I tried it once or twice and it didn't work. Okay, you tried it once or twice and it didn't work. I've been on some of the best country in South Texas where there's as many bucks as there are does, and I've gone a day or two and hitting horse together from daylight to dark and not had one come up. Yet the next day I go out, things really work. Also, and so I think one of the things is people don't try it often enough. It's a natural sound. If you do it, you're not going to scare the animals away like some people think you might. So, but I think the wrong side of it is not how they rattle. It's just that they'll rattle once or twice in a day and go, well, nothing came up, that ain't going to work. But it's interesting in the fact that, like I said, I've been on some really outstanding places where there were a lot of bucks in that time frame when the bucks, as you mentioned, just are starting to really move around. They're starting to look. They're starting to try to establish themselves within the herd. They're trying to set up somewhat of a little bit of hierarchy kind of thing. And some days you can hit the horse together and nothing happens, or you may hit the horse together. It may be a perfect morning. I mean, it is clear. It is cold. It's the right time of year. You hit the horse together, and the first thing in the morning, as soon as it gets getting light, nothing shows up, and you quit. But if you kept on trying, say, every half hour to an hour, you might be surprised that sometimes during that part of the day, and sometimes I've had more success in the middle part of the day rattling than I have either early morning or late afternoon. The other thing is you have to remember, and people have to remember this, to hit the horse together. Deer have a tendency to circle you and then come in directly downwind. I've had opportunities to sit where I could watch people rattle. I've had people watch me rattle from a distance, and I've gotten into a thicket and rattled, and had a guy sitting up on a high spot, and he was watching. And I finally, after about 2 hours, walked out and said, well, nothing came in, and he goes, nope, you're wrong. You had about 10 different bucks that came in, but they stayed just beyond sight of where you could see. So a lot of times when we've hunted in situations, we've done this in the Midwest where it was thick. We've done it in the Northeast and the Southeast. Down here, if you've got a trusted hunting partner, we'll get somebody to rattle on them and take turns. One guy rattles on the ground. The other guy moves out maybe 40, 50 yards downwind, directly downwind, and you rattle and your partner sits out there and he sees deer that you may not see.
That's an awesome tip right there. That's awesome. I like to hear that.
A lot of times too in country and particularly over in the eastern half, you can't see very far sometimes simply because they've been undercover. I mean the ground cover and all that kind of stuff. So what we'll do is we'll get a guy set down on the ground to do the rattling so that you can kick brush, make all kinds of noise, and not fall out of a tree or whatever, and put another guy 30, 40 yards absolutely straight downwind and put him in a tree. And it's amazing sometimes the animals that come in that the guy that's actually rattling will never see. They come in, but the guy that's sitting, out there hid. Because, again, I've been very fortunate where we had almost controlled situation where we had somebody set up where we could really keep an eye on what's going on. And almost always, not always, because they're individuals, almost always they'll come in, particularly mature bucks. And I've watched mature bucks circle downwind 50 to 60, 70 yards to where the guy was rattling, stand there for 30 minutes, hardly moving a muscle. And finally the guy gives up or whatever, the deer catches the scent of the hunter, and he just turns around and walks away. The guy that rattled it never saw, but had there been somebody there, as a hunting partner looking farther downwind, they'd have taken a really good deer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Would you say this is a true statement that a mature buck does not always blow and run out? He just turns and walks out, makes no sound.
I would say that in most instances, a mature buck is going to come in. He is not going to blow. He's going to be absolutely quiet. He is not going to lift his tail and run. He's just going to very politely turn away and walk away.
Like a gentleman.
Like a gentleman who knows he's not something ain't quite right, and it's time to get out of here.
Right on.
That's funny. Larry, I think that's one of the best tips we've ever heard on the Big Buck podcast.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, it has worked many, many times, and particularly in the eastern half of the U.S. where it's a little bit different than it is down here in South Texas. The one thing I do, regardless of wherever I rattle, and I've been fortunate to rattle up bucks in every area of North America where we've had whitetail deer, is when I set up, I work my way into this area, walk very slowly, grunt like a buck does during that time of year. A lot of times when the bucks are walking along, they'll go, eh. They'll take a few steps and look around and go, eh. Walk into an area, set up, start rattling, and but when I do, I set up so that I've got shooting lanes to the left, to the right, quartering away from me, left and right. And a lot of times I really don't pay attention exactly downwind because I want to watch this animal come around me and hopefully get across those shooting lanes to get directly downwind of me. Because once he gets directly downwind of me, I don't care what I have sprayed down with. I don't care what clothing I'm wearing. That buck's going to smell you. Right. And if he gets to that point, again, he probably won't blow. He'll probably just kind of politely just turn around and walk away and try to not draw any attention to himself.
Gotcha. Larry, I have to break this up just a little bit here, and this is a little off subject, but I just had this this picture just came through my news feed on Facebook. You've been tagged in it by Joshua Gonzalez. I don't know who he is.
My grandson.
And he says, there's a picture of you in a kitchen. I assume it's your kitchen. And right. It says, about time this guy made some dang juice.
We keep a running battle. He is a wildlife student here. He just graduated from high school, and he's getting ready to do some stuff with me on TV show thing. But he's a wildlife student here, and they just happened to stop by. And every time they've been here, we have a running battle. We mix orange juice with a couple of other things and keep it in the refrigerator all the time. And
gotcha.
And he and I have a tendency to try to drink it down to where it's not really time to fill it up yet, but you drink it down to where there's just a little bit, maybe a drop or two still left in that pitcher. So that's what he was referring to.
It looks like probably your kitchen, I would assume. And And
it is.
You've got some carrots, an avocado, looks like some Canada Dry Diet ginger ale, I think.
Absolutely, yep. You're very observant.
Yeah.
Some little cherry tomatoes, I think, maybe.
Cherry tomatoes, and yeah, exactly. And then there's some juice you're pouring into a blender, getting ready to juice it up.
Absolutely.
That's funny. All right, so I just had to make comment on that picture. It was such a good picture as we were sitting here doing the show. So let's get into a couple of memorable hunts, Larry. What are some of if you had to pick 2 hunts that were the best of your life, could you do that? Or are there just so many that are good?
I can tell you one that no matter what, that will always stick out in my mind. It takes a little time to tell. It's the first whitetail deer I ever shot. I was convinced that I grew up, as I said, hunting, but we had deer, yet we didn't have very many. So if you shot a deer, you're an absolute hero in the community. And it was opening morning. I was sitting up in a tree with my granddad's single shot shotgun, 12 gauge. And he had passed away about 3 years earlier. So I started hunting with it. And I'm sitting there, and it's opening morning, and I hear a shot in the distance, and almost immediately I hear this animal running toward me. And I'm sitting up in an oak tree, probably a good 30, 35 feet up above the ground, back when I used to hunt in trees. And I'm sitting there, and I look down, and oh, my God, here comes this world record whitetail. I mean, the biggest deer in the world, and he's running right down toward me. And very quickly, I take a 12-gauge double-aught buck, put it in my mouth and between my teeth, and so I've got a second shot in case I need one. And the old shotgun was one of those. It really didn't have any sights, just had kind of a groove in the receiver and a little bitty bead on the front. And deer kind of hesitated just long enough underneath. I mean, my heart's beating so hard I can't hardly stand myself. Cocked the hammer, kind of get the bead on the shoulder of that deer, pull the trigger, and the deer goes down. And oh, my God, I got the world record deer. And just about that time, the deer jumps up, and I'm going, oh, my gosh, now the world record deer is getting away from me. And I'm going, I got to reload. So I broke open the shotgun, and so I grabbed a hold of the fore end of the buttstock. And with that old shotgun, like so many others in that era that they were made in, if you tugged a little bit too much on the fore end, it disengaged the barrel. So I tugged a little bit too much, and all of a sudden I look down, and I'm watching this barrel just falling out of this tree down, going down to the ground, and it hits the ground. I'm sitting up there, and I got the buck stock in my right hand. I got the fore end, and in the left hand I got a double-aught butt shot stuck in my mouth. And for several seconds, as this world record deer runs off, I almost jumped out of the tree. Thankfully, reason finally returned just a little bit, and I kind of half fell, half scrambled down the tree, ran down there and grabbed that barrel, and blew all the mud and dirt out of it, put it all back together, put that double-aught buck in there, and I am literally running in the direction of where this world record deer disappears to, and I'm looking way ahead, and I fall over something, and I turn around, and here's this world record whitetail deer laying dead. And the adrenaline starts leaving my system, and I watch this world record whitetail deer shrink down to a little spike. It's got 5-inch horns on one. I got a 5-inch horn on one side and a 4-inch horn on the other side. So, without a doubt, I mean, it's a memory that I will never, ever, ever forget. And to me, I had him mounted by a taxidermist there that really thought what you did is just kind of cut the horns off, put it on something that kind of had resembled a whitetail deer, I guess, and stretched the skin on, and it's just a little old neck mount. Been fortunate to take some really good deer, but it came right down to it. If I had to get rid of all my mounts that I have, it'd probably be that one. That little thing looks like a rat with horns that I would keep.
Right. Just kind of reminds you about the emotions that you go through when you're in that stand.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Whether it's a giant deer or a little deer, the emotions tend to be very similar, no matter what comes through.
They really can. I mean, I tell stories about how ladies are they're genuine killers. They're inborn killers. I mean, it's amazing. The human female species, for the most part, does not get excited when they shoot a deer until after it's all over with. You put that same big whitetail deer, a big other animal out in front of a male, and I've guided a lot of men and women, and the deer standing there, whatever, standing right out in front of you, and the guy closes his eyes, pulls the trigger, and he shoots about 40, 50 yards on either side of the deer. And you put that same big deer out there, and the lady says, "Ma'am, that's a pretty good deer," and she goes, "The one that's got all that stuff on its head, and you go, "Yes, ma'am, that'd be the one." Bang, deer goes down. No emotions at all from that lady, from having just killed her, just natural born killers, until you get started walking toward that deer with her. And then all of a sudden their voice gets higher and higher and higher. You know, their knees get wobbly, and you know, then they get excited. And I've often said, if there was a feminine trait that I wish I had, it would be that, because I'm one of those that. Now, I've taken a lot of animals with all kinds of things, particularly that go bang and a few that go twang. You know, I still have to talk myself. It's, you know, settle down, don't get overly excited, you know, pick your spot that you want to place the bullet, you know, all those kind of things, and still get excited. So at this point in my life and career, I don't think that excitement's going to leave me. So I'm very thankful for that, but I still wish I had that one feminine trait that I could pull out of a lady and say, okay, I'll switch with you. You get excited beforehand, and I'll get excited afterwards now.
There you go. That is so...
Hold on, Jed. Did we just hear Larry say he wish he had a feminine trait?
Yeah, if there was ever a feminine trait that all the rest I can have.
Right. But I'm with you, Larry. I think that's one. If I could just calm down just a tad.
It's tough. It's tough. You know. That's
I will tell you one other memorable hunt. I've hunted a lot with handguns, each time with Thompson center arms, and now I hunt with riggers. But I was on a place in South Texas with a dear friend of mine. And we'd been trying to take this old Mateer 6-point. We had trail camera pictures of them, and the only time we saw them at night. And we hunted this deer for days and days and weeks, and you know, and every legal means that you could hunt one, and didn't see him. And so finally I'm sitting out there one morning, and unfortunately too, it's back when we were doing Winchester World Whitetail, had a cameraman with him, and this deer walks out. And he walks out at about 75 yards, and I am shaking so badly. I mean, worse than when I shot my first deer. And when I finally closed my eyes and pulled the trigger, the bullet hit about 30 yards in front of the darn deer. You know? Right. And the deer runs off, and the cameraman looks at me and goes, "What in the heck's going on?" And I mean, it was just one of those deer that, for whatever reason, not big. It was just one that we, you know, whatever, just flipped that switch as far as I'm concerned. And it flipped it on me, and I missed the deer by a good 35, 40 yards.
It's just that emotion that overcomes you. I don't know what it is, but I'm with you, Larry. It happens to me. It has happened to me frequently. Just
it's great. It's great, though, isn't it?
It is.
It don't get no better.
No, I wouldn't trade that excitement for anything. It's just amazing.
No, sir.
But boy, it sure makes you screw up now and then. That's for sure.
It does. It does. It happens.
Let's talk a little bit about the Extreme Huntress, Larry.
Yes, let's talk about a little bit what's going on in your career now.
In my career now, it's just, we're, of course, very much involved with the Trailing the Hunter's Moon TV show that my primary sponsor, my title sponsor is Dallas Safari Club, and some other sponsors that I just really dearly love are Riggers, Ice, and Hornady, and Walls, and 10X, and these are companies that I have dealt with and would use, frankly, regardless. I mean, I love their products. But with this particular show, I've been very, very fortunate. We started about 3 years ago. I've been doing all kinds of shows, and our shows at one time or another were some of the top rated shows by Nielsen ratings and all those. And I appreciated that. But just just weren't getting the quality that I knew we were capable of producing, and the shows, I wanted them to be a little bit different in terms of quality. And so I started my own company again. And out of it came Trailing the Hunter's Moon, which is the title I used of a book that I wrote several years ago. And it's basically what I've done with my life. The Hunter's Moon is that first full moon in November, but I've trailed that Hunter's Moon regardless of the time of year all over the world. And so that's where the vast majority of my focus is right now is in producing that show, which appears on the Sportsman channel, and the things that go with it in terms of blogs and magazine articles and video shows and all those other kind of things.
Gotcha. And how about the Huntress competition?
The Extreme Huntress competition, I was going to come back to that. Tom Opry came up with this several years ago, and fortunately, I've been involved as a judge for the last several years. The last 2 years, we've really kind of stepped that up in that last year, we had 4 ladies that were chosen out of a tremendous number of ladies that were brought to the 777 Ranch, put them through some ungodly paces, including biathlons when it was 105 degrees for the middle part of the day, running through the brush with snakes and ticks and all those other kind of things, and all kinds of different skill sets, everything having to do with that you can imagine with rifles, from long range to charging animals to everything kind of in between, field judging whitetail deer, and it really kind of stepped it up a notch. And then this year, the year that we have not yet decided. The judges have turned in their scores, but there's still a little bit of the contest to be determined by the people out there. We had 6 finalists, let me say. We had, I think, over 200 entrants from all over the world, but we had a lady from Texas. We had a lady from Wyoming, another one from up in Canada, up in British Columbia, and then a lady from Sweden, one from Australia, and one from South Africa. And I will say this much, all 6 of these ladies I was extremely impressed with in terms of everything of their abilities to handle firearms. To a lot of them had shot a bow, but they'd never shot a recurve or a longbow, and we kind of threw that at them, and they reacted and learned very, very quickly, and put them through all kinds of shooting paces, all kinds of skills. Like I said again, running 2 miles and in the heat of the day, which in Texas can be hardly hot in July, and right down to doing a really nasty job of confronting them as we being anti-hunters. We've been Olivia Nalos Opry, Tom's wife, and then my old buddy Jim Zumbo and I brought each one of these ladies in, and unlike us in real life, but who have also had to deal with the real life of anti-hunters, screamed all kinds of obscenities at them and wanted to see how that they would react. And I have to say that all 6 of the ladies reacted absolutely wonderfully. I mean, usually you do this kind of competition or a competition like this, and there's a vast difference between your top score and your bottom score. And I'll be very open with you. There were very, very few points between the lady I ranked number 1 as compared to the lady I ranked number 6. So, and I know that probably Jim and Olivia probably looked at it differently. So this is going to be one of those, it has been one of those competitions from the physical aspect of it. Voting is still open, I think starts now in October 1, and then we will make the announcement of the winner. And among other things, she'll receive a bronze from my sculpting partner and world, far as I'm sure, world greatest sculptor, wildlife sculptor, Mark James, is put together, and that announcement will be made on the Friday night of the Dallas Safari Club convention, which is held, of course, in Dallas, and I think this year on January the 16th or 17th or whatever that Friday night is. So unbelievable competition. I'll tell you what, my hat is off to all the ladies involved to just get it narrowed down to the 6 that we did. We had judges from all over the world look at their credentials in terms of what was presented to us, and tough competition from word go. And when we got to 6 finalists, I mean, unbelievable bunch of ladies is what all I can say.
Yeah, that's the way you sum it up. Basically, it's the only way to sum it up. Just an amazing group of lady hunters, all just across the board.
I mean, these I don't care who wins, quite frankly, because
right.
Any one of the 6, that were the finalists, as far as I'm concerned, certainly all 6 deserve the title, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Actually,
I agree. I promised Jay Fish that I'd ask you the question about your opinion about the Johnny King buck. Where do you think that belongs?
I'll tell you what, I've had an opportunity to look at thanks to Jay showing me the antlers, and I saw him not long after he got them. It's an interesting thing. Among other things, I'm a professional member of Boone and Crockett Club, and it's the scoring system by which we have gone forever. Personally, I would love to see this deer be scored in front of a committee to see, so that you had several opinions involved. I'm not sure what all has happened to take it to the state to where it is now, but, the way I look at things, I'm all for the animal. To me, the perfect record book would list the animal owned by it rather than taken by it. So,
right.
I would love to see this. I'd love to see this rack be scored back by, a committee of Boone and Crockett to see, let them finally determine as a group where this animal should rank or if he should rank within Boone and Crockett.
Gotcha. All right. I have a bunch of questions on Facebook from our fans that are fans of yours as well that have sent in some questions. I'd like to run down through those with you, Larry, if that's
absolutely
cool. Yep.
Yes, sir.
All right. So Jeff Job, his question is, he wants to know if he can have your job.
I'll tell you what, tomorrow morning at 3 o'clock when I get up and start working on these articles that I've got due, I would gladly change places with him.
All right, so Jeff,
but certainly,
Jeff
it's
Job,
come on, by golly.
Jeff Job has been officially hired as Larry Weisshuhn's ghostwriter. Excellent.
There you go.
All right. Scott Thornton, he wants to know, in your opinion, what is the ultimate hunting revolver, both caliber and frame?
I'll tell you my ultimate revolver. Years ago, when I was on staff with Shooting Times and Handgunning as a handgun hunting editor at the time, I got a Ruger Super Blackhawk in a 44 mag, a Ruger Super Blackhawk 100 in 44 mag that I have used for a long time now, and it is, of all the handguns I've shot, is my favorite. It probably followed. I love single actions more so than I do double actions, simply because I grew up during the cowboy era to begin with,
yep.
And also with those, regardless of the caliber that you shoot, they are different in terms of recall. The single action is the old peacemaker type grips, if you will. The double actions, there's generally a little knurl kind of thing so that it fits right in the web of your hand. So when you shoot a heavy recoil and you absorb all the recoil rather than let it roll a little bit in the hand. So I love the single actions. That's probably my favorite personally out of the whole bunch. I've shot a lot of stuff with a lot of different other calibers, including, brown bear and things like that, with a 454 Casull and 460 Smith & Wesson and 500 and 480 Ruger and some of those others. But that, to me, still, when you get right down to it, I feel very comfortable. I've got a prototype Zeiss scope on it. It's a long eye release scope that I've had on it. I shoot 240 grain Hornet DXTP and commercial ammo, and with it at 100 yards from a good solid rest, I can keep all 6 shots in about 2.5 inches, and I feel very comfortable with it shooting from a rest such as those done by Bob Geary and those guys out to 125 yards, and usually try to get within 100 yards or less of the animal, and I do that without shooting a 454, 460, or whatever. So my favorite, Ruger Super Blackhawk pistol.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Jeff Underhill, he wants to know how many whitetails you've harvested over your long career.
I'm not much on the term harvested, so I'm going to tell you I have not harvested any whitetail deer.
All right.
I have taken and killed many. I have no earthly idea.
Gotcha.
To me, harvest denotes a standing crop that you can take a sickle and reach out there and cut the legs or cut the bottom part out of, whereas to take or to hunt or even to kill, even though that's not politically correct in some instance, to me is a much better term when it comes to taking animals. But I've been very fortunate. I worked as a wildlife biologist for a long time in research, and there were 2 guys, including me, and another guy named Rod Marber and I, who were the only 2 guys in the state of Texas many years ago who were allowed to take any game animals for research purposes, regardless of the species. And as a result of that, part of that time, we shot many whitetail deer. And again, I've hunted for a long time, and I've hunted a lot of states, and I was never really one for keeping numbers, so I have no earthly idea.
Gotcha. All right, so Keith Haffelin wants to know if he can hunt with you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Anybody can hunt with me if they want to. We set our schedule up usually almost a year in advance for the TV shows that I do, and either fortunately or unfortunately these days, everything I do when it comes to hunt, I don't get a chance to just go out and hunt for my own self anymore. There's always a TV camera. So I'm sure some of the outfitters that we go with, or some of the places that we have access to, would love to see me bring somebody else.
Right, I bet, sure. I'm sure some of those they would love extra company. I'm absolutely positive of that.
Yes, sir.
Now, Bill Lawrence. Bill was actually a fellow that I met up at the Kittery Trading Post, and he's the guy I was telling you about. He spotted my shirt and said, "Hey, you're Jay from the Big Buck Podcast."
Yes, sir. I remember you saying that.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Bill Lawrence, he writes, and I think this is a question about which you prefer. Do you prefer tree stand, ground blind, spot, or stalk as your preferred method of hunting?
Spot and stalk by far. I have not hunted out of a raised or elevated blind or a tree in many years now, and so I prefer hunting on the ground. I do a lot of spot and stalk where I possibly can. or a version of it. I helped develop a stalking shield with through nature blinds that I've used a lot of different places. Kind of looks like their tree stand that looks just like a tree. But so I hunt off the ground, and I love hunting off the ground for a lot of reasons. I love that eye-to-eye contact that you get. The challenge of dealing with that animal on the ground. And two, I've hunted a lot of places in the past where we had tree stands or whatever set up, and you're set up and the wind is perfect, and as the day develops, the wind goes totally to heck. Well, now you got a choice. You got to crawl down with that climber or whatever and make a lot of racket to go somewhere else, where if I'm sitting on the ground and things change a little bit, I just pick up and still hunt my way to another area, and I'm set up immediately without making a lot of racket. So I really like hunting. I really like hunting off the ground, and I love spotting stock.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's actually, as I get older, I've drifted away from the stand hunting almost completely, and I've gone in the ground blind. I basically just go right to the ground. So I'm glad to hear you say that. That's nice to know. Let's see, Charles Byram, what is your favorite state or region for whitetails? And the same question for mule deer.
Whitetails, I love Texas during the fall when they're coming to horns, primarily because they come to horns here because, number one, we have a lot of deer. So when you go out and you hit the horns, if you got a lot of bucks out there, as we do, better chances something will respond. So Texas has really long been my favorite place to hunt when it comes to whitetail deer. But I'll have to say that Kentucky runs a really close second. There's some huge bucks there not far off the northern, kind of south of the northern border a little bit. They're on the Ohio River that is kind of has been and just they're unbelievably huge. And it's an area that I love to go into and hunt in terms of whitetail deer. So that's probably my second most favorite place. As far as mule deer concerned, right now, taking a good mature mule deer that if you're in the score that scores 180 or better, that's a tough assignment. I'll tell you what, there are very, very few places where you can do that with any kind of great consistency. And especially in terms of some instances now, if you're going to try to hunt some of those better mule deer areas, it's a draw situation that it may take you many, many years to draw a permit or license in that area. So one of the places that I really enjoy hunting is for mule deer is down in Storm, Mexico. It's a safe area as far as Mexico is concerned. It's a high desert, and I love hunting coos deer. Coos deer are probably my favorite animal to really hunt when you get right down there as far as North American game is concerned, or at least one of the favorites. And there's good hunting to be had. The ranches are huge. The animals have come back really good. The ranchers there have done an excellent job in terms of managing, and there's good age structure, and there's an excellent opportunity anytime you go out on some of those better ranches down there to take just an absolute monster deer. So I have to say that probably Sonora, Mexico is my favorite place to hunt mule deer.
Gotcha. All right. Christopher Brammer wants to know what your longest kill shot is.
I am not a proponent of long-range shooting. However, I do shoot long-range on the FDW at their sportsman all-weather, all-terrain marksmanship course, and do a lot of shooting up there at long-range, both with pistols and also with rifles. Probably the longest one that I did, and it's not that I'm necessarily proud of it. It's just it was a huge animal, and there just wasn't getting any closer. And I knew my gun, and I knew what it would do at those ranges, and that happened to be on a really big Coues whitetail down in Mexico, and it was with a Ruger American rifle in 30-06 shooting the Hornady, whatever 180 grain or whatever it was, Interbond, and their American whitetail load. It was 762 yards. So wow. That's the longest one that I can confirm. I've shot it a few in earlier years, a lot farther than that, I think. But
right.
And again, I'm not a proponent of long-range shooting. To me, the thrill in hunting comes in getting as close as you possibly can.
Right.
In this instance, that's how close we could get. There was no other way to get at this animal, and I knew my rifle really well. I'd shot it many times on the range out to farther than that, nearly 800 yards. So I knew the exact hold. I had a Zeiss scope that I could do the dial up on. I knew my dope from my rifle from spending a lot of time with it and all that kind of stuff, and shot from a very solid rest. But again, I would not recommend it. But that, again, is one of those situations as close as we could get. And It was an animal I really dearly, dearly wanted, and I knew that I could make a shot, and thank the good Lord, he guided the bullet, and I did.
Right. All right. So David Childers wants to know if you're a real cowboy.
You got me laughing. I wear a Western hat. I grew up out in the country where we spent a lot of time messing with horses and cattle, and you know, to me, it's kind of like, am I a real Texan? Yeah, you know, I am, but, you know, just being a real cowboy means a lot of different things. It means something way beyond just wearing the hat and wearing boots and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like, it's kind of like a state of mind. In terms of being a real cowboy means that you have a lot of respect for people. You treat people with respect and those kind of things. So it goes deeper than just wearing the hat and looking the part. It's the life that you live, and I strive to do that as much as I can.
Gotcha. And I did notice that when we met, that when you met my wife, you took your hat off and you said hello, and then when she left the scene, you'd take your hat off, and that's part of that lifestyle I think you're talking about.
It is.
Yep. And Michael Ague wants to know who you were with on your first deer hunt and how big was your first buck?
Well, as I told you, I was convinced it was the world record whitetail deer until I stumbled over it and found out it was the spike. And actually, it was a hunt by myself, but my dad was hunting not very far away, and my mother wasn't hunting very far away from where I was too. So I was with them basically in camp with my mom and dad.
Gotcha.
And my younger brother at that point, he was just a little baby, but it was pretty much a family affair.
Very cool. Well, thank you for answering those questions for our fans.
My pleasure. That was fun.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. And Dusty, you got any questions for Larry before we let him go?
I want to hear what your number one tip is, Larry, for whitetail hunting. Give us your number one tip.
My number one tip for hunting whitetails is go hunting. Don't look for excuses not to hunt. It's too hot. It's too cold. The wind's blowing too hard. Go hunting and then pay attention while you're there. My dad used to put me on a deer stand, and he said, "Now, son, stay away." It didn't mean he knew I wouldn't go to sleep. It meant pay attention to what's going on. So to me, the biggest tip that I can give somebody is just simply to go out and hunt, and don't look for excuses not to. And while you're hunting, pay attention to what's going on around you.
Awesome tip.
Love that tip. Larry, how can we reach you, or how can the fans reach you or reach out to you? What Facebook pages, stuff like that?
Probably the best way, I've got a Facebook page called Trailing the Hunter's Moon, and they can reach me there and by going on Facebook. And I can't remember the numbers, but if they look for Trailing the Hunter's Moon, they'll find it. Or one of the easier ways to do that is I've got a website. It's www.trailingthehuntersmoon.com, and they can go there, and there's a link so they can send me an email, and if they'll email me, I will do my best to respond. And I ask their indulgence if they don't hear from me for just a little bit, because it simply means we're in an area where there is no internet connection. But probably the easiest and best way is to go to that website, trailingthehuntersmoon.com, and getting in touch with me through that.
Got it. All right, we'll put that in our show notes and make sure we have a big prominent link right to it. You got it. Well, Larry, this has been a pleasure, and thank you so much for joining us on the Big Buck Podcast. You've made it just a great treat to have you on, somebody I've admired from a distance for many, many years. So this is awesome, just awesome.
Well, you guys are very kind, and I appreciate that, but it's been my pleasure, and it's truly an honor to be on with you guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for everything you've done for the industry too, Larry. That, from me growing up watching you and seeing where you started and where you are now, it's unbelievable. And we thank you for that.
Yes, we do.
Well, thank you. We're all in this together, so we got to strive to move forward.
I'm with you on that. Absolutely.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks again. Well, Dusty, that was probably one of our pinnacle shows of all shows.
I'm honored to be on the other end as the co-host of the Big Buck Registry, Big Buck Podcast, and be able to talk with Larry. And we pulled some information on Larry that some may never heard of. The rattling that gave me cold chills. That we had Larry right here telling us about his technique as rattling and giving us the boost in our confidence of rattling. Use it. Don't use it twice and quit. Don't, keep going with it. There's always that potential that that big buck is right around the corner, and that one more rattle sequence would get him in your lap just like it did for him many, many times. I mean, he's a proven fact that rattling does work.
I love the tip that he gave, so it makes me want to buddy hunt now.
Right, agreed.
Just mix it up. We both rattle and then go down 50 yards downwind, I think he said.
Right. Yeah. Just, a mature buck's going to find that downwind zone and try to pick you out. And that's what they do. It's factual right there. That's very factual information.
Yeah. I mean,
that he talked about.
He observed that. Not only people observing him, but he's observed that same situation over and over. So just apply that to your deer woods. That's bring a buddy, get some rattlesticks, rattle whatever, and put one guy 50 yards downwind. See what happens. Yeah,
absolutely. And take advantage of rattling. When the rut is here, they're looking for that activity.
Right.
It's a natural sound. He said, walk in the woods with a grunt. Use a grunt call walking in. Get into that area that you normally wouldn't. I'm not saying go dead nuts in their bedding area and start rattling. No. That's not what I'm telling you. But get close to the bedding area. Get close to the
periphery.
Yeah, the perimeter.
Perimeter.
Get in there and get close to the sanctuary and do some rattling.
Right.
Take a chance. If you don't take that chance, like he said, you're not gonna kill the buck.
Right.
You gotta take the chance. You gotta be out there. You gotta do trial and error with your rattling.
Yep. You gotta go. You have to hunt. No excuses.
Absolutely.
And always try the rattle.
Yeah. Why not? There's no such thing as failure when you're rattling.
Right. May not see it, but maybe try the buddy system.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Absolutely. that was awesome. And to hear Larry tell us that. Wow, Jay, I felt, it really just, it made it set in that what we're doing on the Big Buck Registry, Big Buck podcast is, some awesome things for not only us, but our listeners. And we appreciate you guys tuning in with us every weekly. And we tell you every week that we're going to bring the best and the most informative podcast that you'll ever hear.
Yep.
And we're striving to do that.
We're bringing the best guests we can possibly bring so that you can learn a little bit more to help bring your deer hunt to the next level. And
absolutely.
That's what we're trying to do here. Not only for ourselves, but for you too. So
absolutely.
Thanks again to Larry for joining us, and hopefully we'll see him on the road as we hit our road show after hunting season and connect with him somewhere at some show in the country.
Oh, yeah. I think we will.
Yeah, and I'd love to have him back on the show at some point.
Absolutely, and thanks again, Larry. We really enjoyed you and appreciate you taking time out of your day to connect with us and talk a little bit about hunting.
Absolutely. Loved it. Dusty, what do we have for the Chubby Times tip of the week this week?
Take if you invented something that you wanted to, it's kind of a mental thought. Say you're trying to work on a deer mental on your own, or you're trying to work on some kind of stump lick, or don't be scared to try it.
Okay.
Take new products to the woods. Take them off to the side where you may not hunt quite often, just in case it's a spooker.
Gotcha.
But don't be afraid to take your own products to the woods and try them out on your herd. Trial and error is success in the long run.
You'll find new things that work and things that don't. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
I like it. I like that a lot. Don't be afraid.
Absolutely.
Don't get stuck in that rut or the traditional sense where you're just stuck on one thing.
Right, absolutely. It may just be that one thing that you haven't tried because you were scared or you didn't think that it would work, but you still need to try it. It may be that one thing that gets you to where you can kill your mature buck right on your stuff, your product, right there in the woods.
Right.
You got to try it.
Good point. Very good point.
Awesome.
All right, man. How do we reach you?
Facebook.com, or let me say that again, Facebook.com/Chubby Times Outdoors. Dusty Huntneck, right there on Facebook. Look me up, check me out, shoot me a message. You want to talk? Let's talk. Jay, how can they get with you at the Big Buck Registry?
The Big Buck Registry. It's a long story, Dusty.
Oh, boy.
But I'm going to tell it to you anyway.
Let's hear it.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Start with the Facebook page, facebook.com/Big Buck Registry. Then we jump over to Twitter, twitter.com/Big Buck Registry. Jump over to YouTube, youtube.com/Big Buck Registry. You want to reach out to us on our Facebook page or our regular page. If you want to reach out to us on our regular website, it's www.bigbuckregistry.com. You want to give us a call and give us some feedback about this show, which we would greatly appreciate, 724-613-2825. Or if you just want to reach out and give us a call because you want to be on the show or whatever, that'd be great. You can also listen to our other shows on iTunes by going to www.bigbuckregistry.com/iTunes. So if you have any kind of Apple device, or if you don't have an Apple device, a better place to listen would be www.bigbuckregistry.com/Stitcher. And that's STITCHER. We'd love to have your reviews. If you could, go to either one of those places, leave a 5-star review, subscribe to the show. That's what we'd really like to see. And if you'd like to submit a picture to the Big Buck Registry to be on our Big Buck Wall of Fame, I should say, go to www.bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck. And lastly, if you'd like to do a share for share as part of the Big Buck Registry Share for Share program, meaning that we share each other's Facebook page on our page, go to www.bigbuckregistry.com/S4S. There, I'm done.
Wow.
Woo, man.
Big Buck Registry.
I don't even write that down anymore. It's just right here.
You're on it.
It's right on my noggin. Right on the
Yeah,
top.
you're on it. You are on it. If you got somebody that you want us to talk with on the Big Buck Registry, Big Buck Podcast,
yes,
please shoot a message in, and email, either or. Get with us on it, and maybe we can. We'll try our best to reach out to who you want to hear on the podcast.
Yep. And this is not confirmed yet, but I believe we're going down under for the next show, Dusty.
We're going down under, mate.
Mate. Going down to Australia. We've got a fellow by the name of Shaggy who's going to join us on the show, and he is actually a big bow hunter in Australia. And get this, he hunts wild donkey.
Craziness.
We're going to touch on some subjects we've never touched on before.
We're throwing in a change up.
This is the change up.
It should be very interesting. And mate, we're going to check him out. We're going to get some information on hunting places that you may have never been or never knew that they hunted.
Since I've friended Shaggy on Facebook, every other day he's basically he says having some tea and goat.
Nice.
On the Barbie.
Some goat cheese?
No, just goat. Real goat. No goat cheese. Just goat.
Craziness.
Some crazy stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that. And, man, what awesome things are happening for us here and for the listeners here at the Big Buck Registry, Big Buck Podcast. We love having you on with us, and we hope you enjoy it. It's a dream come true for Jay and myself.
Yep.
And we'll guarantee that we are going to get the best content that we can get for the listeners and the hunters, and maybe some hunters that are people that don't even hunt listen to us, that just enjoy the conversation with the other hunters, and what a group of people that the hunters are.
Yep. And as we begin the 2014-15 season, I can't believe I'm saying 15, but 2014-15 hunting season, start to send in those new pictures as these big bucks fall. We want to see what's happening out there, and if it's one quality buck with one pretty interesting story because the picture's pretty darn interesting, beware. We might ask you to be on this show to tell your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And be safe. We want you to make it home to be able to tell us the story.
Yeah, always be safe in the woods. Double up on those straps to make sure they're still working if you're in the tree stand, and always know what you're shooting at. Always.
Absolutely.
Yep.
What a great show, Jeff.
Great show. All right, just the best of the best. And man, thanks again, Larry.
Absolutely. Larry, you're a legend. We look up to you, and we're very happy you joined us.
Yep. Well, man, I think that's a wrap.
Awesome.
All right. It's Jay Scott.
And I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast. See you next week.
Can't wait.